Welcome back, class. Today we're looking at section 7.3, applying the zero product property to solve equations. In our previous videos, I've taught you that zeros also means x-intercepts, solutions, and roots. Let's go ahead and find our zeros. To find the zeros, you're just going to take these factors and set them equal to 0. Zeros, also known as x-intercepts. So once again, I'm taking x plus 1 and x plus 9, and I'm just going to set each factor equal to 0. Now I'm going to solve each equation. So x plus 1 equals 0. To get x by itself, I want to subtract 1 to both sides. X equals -1, which means that we have an x-intercept at -1. Okay, for x plus 9 equals 0, I want to subtract 9 to both sides. That's going to give me x equals -9. So our second 0 is at -9. Now that we've plotted our zeros, let's go ahead and find the vertex of this function and then write the function in vertex form. Since this function is in factored form, we need to locate the vertex by looking for the middle. The middle number between -9 and -1 would be -5. So the axis of symmetry is at x equals -5. So we know that the vertex is going to be somewhere along the axis of symmetry. We also know that the x-coordinate of our vertex is at -5. Now let's find the y-coordinate. To find the y-coordinate, we're going to use our function, which is y equals x plus 1 times x plus 9. X is -5. Take that x value and plug it into all the x's. So that's -5 plus 1 times -5 plus 9. -5 plus 1 is -4, and -5 plus 9 is +4. -4 times +4 is -16. So the y value of our vertex is at -16. So now I know that the vertex is at -5, -16. I'll go ahead and plot that point. I'll extend my graph. -11, -12, -13, 14, 15, 16. So -5, -16. We'll put it right there. Our a value is 1. So the scale factor is 1. And I know that because if we look at the first binomial, notice how we have no number on the left side of our parentheses. So the scale factor is 1. Let's label everything. The vertex is at -5, -16. To use the scale factor, we'll go 1 to the right and 1 unit up. And if there's a point on the right side of our axis of symmetry, we're automatically going to have a point on the left side of our axis of symmetry. Now let's draw the graph, highlight it, and answer the problem. So the problem wanted us to write our function in vertex form. So I'll call this step number 4, vertex form. So vertex form is y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. Our a value is 1. X minus, remember the coordinates of the vertex are also h and k. So it's x minus -5 squared minus 16. K is -16. Simplify this. Y equals 1 times x. And a negative times a negative is a positive, so that's going to be positive 5 squared minus 16. So the equation of this function in vertex form is y equals 1 times x plus 5 squared minus 16. Let's move on. Explain 2a. Solve each equation using the distributive property and the zero product property. We have 3x times x minus 4 plus 5 times x minus 4 equals 0. Before we get into that, let's go back to the distributive property. The distributive property allows us to take our monomial, which is the 3, and multiply it to our polynomial. Our polynomial here is x plus y. To be more specific, this polynomial is a binomial. How do we use the distributive property? Well, we just take the 3 and multiply it to each number inside of the parentheses. So 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times y is 3y. So in this problem, we're going to be working backwards. We're going to go from 3x plus 3y to 3 times x plus y. And we're going to use a technique called factoring. We're going to be factoring out the GCF, the greatest common factor. So if you look at each term, notice how each term has a 3. So to work backwards, I would factor out the 3, the greatest common factor. I pulled the 3 aside, which left me with x plus y. Now that we understand how to use the distributive property going backwards, let's go ahead and apply it to our problem. So we have 3x times x minus 4 plus 5 times x minus 4 equals 0. Notice how in each term, they both have an x minus 4. That's the greatest common factor. Let's go ahead and pull that aside, just like how we pulled aside the 3. So I'm going to write x minus 4 times, well, what am I left with? I'm left with the 3x plus 5 equals 0. Now that we've written this in factored form, let's use the zero product property to solve. So we're just going to set each factor equal to 0, x minus 4 equals 0, and 3x plus 5 equals 0. So now let's solve for x. Add 4 to both sides. X is going to equal 4. In our second equation, we're going to subtract 5 to both sides. That's going to give us 3x equals negative 5. Divide both sides by 3. X equals negative 5/3. And those are our solutions. So the answers are x equals 4 and x equals negative 5/3. Let's look at another problem. Explain 2b. Solve the equation using the distributive property and the zero product property. So remember, we're working backwards. Look at each term and see what they have in common. Each term has an x plus 2. So let's go ahead and take the x plus 2 out. By taking it out, we're factoring out the greatest common factor. The remaining factor is going to be whatever's left over. And what's left over is negative 9 and positive 3x. To use the zero product property, we want to set each factor equal to 0. So x plus 2 equals 0, and negative 9 plus 3x equals 0. Now let's solve each equation. In the first equation, we want to subtract 2 to both sides. That's going to give us 0 minus 2 is negative 2. In our second equation, add 9 to both sides, which is 3x equals 9. Divide both sides by 3, x equals 3. So the solutions are x equals -2 and x equals 3. Moving on. Explain 3. The height of one diver above the water during a dive can be modeled by the equation h equals -4 times 4t plus 5 times t minus 3, where h is height in feet and t is time in seconds. Find the time it takes for the diver to reach the water. So I went ahead and drew a picture of a swimmer who's on a diving board. And he's jumping off the diving board. And we want to figure out how long it'll take for him to reach the water. And to find that, we need to use the equation h equals -4 times 4t plus 5 times t minus 3. H is going to represent the distance between the water to where the diver is at. Now, if the diver hits the water, then that means that h is at 0. So 0 equals -4 times 4t plus 5 times t minus 3. Now we're going to use the zero product property to figure out what t is. You can't use the zero product property for every problem. You can only use it when the function is in factored form. And this is in factored form. So we have 0 equals -4, 4t plus 5 equals 0, and t minus 3 equals 0. In our first equation, 0 equals -4. We don't have a variable, therefore we can't solve for t. Go ahead and cross that out. In our second equation, we have 4t plus 5 equals 0. To solve for t, we're going to subtract 5 to both sides. That's 4t equals -5. Divide both sides by 4. T equals -5/4. In our third equation, we have t minus 3 equals 0. To solve for t, we need to add 3 to both sides. T equals 3. Now let's analyze our solutions. Remember, this is a word problem, so our solutions need to make sense. Since t represents time, and you can't go back in time, go ahead and cross out t equals -5/4, because it wouldn't make sense to go back in time -5/4 seconds. So instead, we're going to use t equals 3. It'll take 3 seconds for the diver to reach the water. With any word problem, you want to make sure that your answer is written in a sentence. Otherwise, you haven't answered anything. Well, that's it for this lesson. If you liked it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe.